All right, we're back for part two of the NBL panel here on ESPN. We appreciate everyone for watching part one. And from part one, we do have Derek Rucker and Jason Cadee back. But this conversation is a little bit different. I think it's one that doesn't happen enough publicly in the NBL space, but it's about the state of the league. How does the NBL continue to compete in the global marketplace of basketball? And to do that, I figured we bring in Chris Pongrass, outgoing CEO of Hoops Capital, which is the company that encompasses the Sydney Kings and Sydney Flames, two-time NBL champion, man who owes me a steak dinner. We'll talk about that later. Trust me on this. But Chris, can you just, before we start, everyone knows what these guys are doing, but your new venture going into the NIL space, can you tell us just a little bit about what that looks like?
Of course. Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here. So I've stepping down from Kings and Flames after 7 years now, and launching a new NIL-based agency, specific agency with Daniel Moldovan, Lighthouse NIL, and looking to really work in the college space. It's something that really intrigues me and something I think needs a lot of work in this country and a lot of kids that need help. So really excited to move into that space.
It's a way to make lots of money is what is the answer to this. So look, the conversation today is we want to touch on a few things. One is NIL, right, and how that impacts the NBL. One is the challenges in recruiting imports, which is something that I speak to a lot of GMs about on background. We want to talk expansion a little bit, and also the idea of a trade deadline. It's something that has been brought up a lot. We see a lot of pretend trades, mock trades, but what does that actually look like? How can that actually function? And the first thing I want to talk about is NIL, because I don't know if people have a good enough grasp on just how much money is out there. And I wonder, when you first started, like, I'm sure you had a good grasp of it, but how did it impact your teams when you first started realizing that, oh my God, there's so much money out there?
I mean, a lot. I think for those that don't know, NIL stands for name, image, likeness. And what shifted in the last 2 years was college athletes could never get paid until some landmark changes in the NCAA landscape, where college athletes are now being rewarded for their contributions to, the broadcast, the media, all of the, assets that colleges leverage off. So I think it's amazing that these players are finally being paid, but what happens is they open up the floodgates and maybe too quickly, and athletes are getting paid a lot of money, and I think that's it's interesting what that landscape does to the broader global market, particularly in Australia, for athletes wanting to return.
And for the early years, I'd say maybe, because how long has it been around now, NIL? Maybe 6-7 years?
Oh, no, I mean, only the last two where they've really started.
Where
some got some back pay, though.
Yeah, before some, yes. So it's kind of wild west at the moment. And, you hear stories about athletes not being able to recoup the money, all types of stories. Yeah. I hope that it's getting more professional, and like what steps can be taken to improve it for the athletes.
Well, now that it's legal for these clubs to be, these teams, college teams, to be able to pay their athletes, it's run through a couple of different avenues, right? There's rev share, which is the college themselves, and then there's the NIL branding deals that they're, sponsorship opportunities that are, utilized through the college or just through the individual themselves being able to be paid. So I think it's much easier for them too, and again, I think it's a landscape. When you mentioned the Wild West, it's pretty true, because I think a lot of these colleges don't even, they're keeping up with the changes that the NCAA are making. And so, again, I think that's why it's really important to have people in that space that are working to try and help these athletes, manage it.
So let's go through some of the stats. So broadly, a lot of the high-level guys can make up to $1 million US net, right? Ben Henschel's a really good example of someone who, he had offers around $2 million US net, and I spoke to a school during his process that was prepared to pay him over $3 million US net. So for context, that's roughly like 7 or 8 times what Bryce Cotton makes, right? So that's what is on offer for these guys. And so the way it impacts the NBL is intriguing to me. Not only is there the potential for schools to just go and recruit players out of the pro ranks, right? We've seen G League guys go from the G League to college now, but it's also impacting when these guys first come to the NBL, because right now there's no kid who's really ever going to not maximize his eligibility, right? That's the difference. And so, who are some of the guys that you brought in when they were second year of college, third year of college. You can recruit those guys. You can't do that anymore, right?
No, and I know that they've utilized the fifth year that was the COVID year that they brought in. I know that they're looking at trying to add a fifth year of eligibility anyway, and so if I'm a parent of one of these players and agent, you're pushing them because I think it might be the right basketball situation, but from a financial perspective, it's something that you need to utilize because there's only 450 NBA jobs, and so if they want to become a pro later on, and you're able to maximize your earning potential in college when you're 18, 19 years old, you take advantage of that for as long as you can.
And Jace, I'm sure you've seen this with Coach John Calipari talking about the age. Now it's guys, because they've opened it up, now you got guys 22, 23, 24 going back to college and playing. It's crazy right now. The landscape is something that we've never seen before.
So one other thing to add is the other thing that they changed at the same time was the transfer portal rule, where you used to only be able, if you want to transfer to another school, you had to redshirt a year, you had to sit out 12 months. A lot of players would disincentivize them from leaving because they lose a year of their almost pro career. And now they've changed that where you can enter the transfer portal. So I feel for these college teams as well, because if you're a team that a mid-major that wants to develop talent, and you recruit talent really well, they play really well, and then a bigger school comes over the top and almost, pulls the rug out from under you.
You can speak on that better than most, but I think that's the one. The money is a whole nother conversation, but the change of being able to just go wherever you want after each, like some people going to 4 different schools and leaving.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's changed what we're seeing come out of colleges too. Because you used to kind of just see a kid went for 4 years to the same school. They had to work through some adversity, maybe didn't play a couple of years, then found their way. Well, now you're just going, I don't like this, I'm out. I don't like this, I'm out. Now throw money into that, it's a whole different conversation of what kids are experiencing at college.
So I spoke to a GM last night, and he brought this thing up, which not only are you getting these guys later, but the prospect of getting a player who has earned $100K a month, and all of a sudden that guy now joins your team after making $100K a month for the last 2 seasons, you're getting different sorts of people, right? So this GM called it an emotional vortex, right? You're getting a different type of person than you previously would, right? You're getting Jack White go through 4 years of college and comes to the NBL, and that's cool. Now you're getting a guy who's just gone to a decent school, maybe a decent Big Ten school or a Pac-12 school, made a lot of money. They come here, they're expecting the world, and all of a sudden they're the 10th guy on a roster making 120 AUD gross as opposed to $1 million US net. Like, you're getting different sorts of players.
But that might also help. If I'm a team looking at that, you might have a player that naturally may have gone to chase more money in Europe. They come back and they're on your roster and they've got $1 million in the bank. They can afford, if they want to try and make it pro, they can afford to earn a minimum contract for 4 years and try and test it out to get to where they want to get to, because they've got money in the bank that will allow them to live that way. That's the other thing I look at it. You also find players that might be more mature. Instead of recruiting a 19-year-old, you're getting someone that's played 4 or 5 years of college. They're 24 years old. Their body's matured. They're coming into their prime. You might get a different, more mature basketball player at the same time. So I know that there are some challenges for teams in the NBL getting an older player. But at the same time, it could also work in some teams' favors, albeit they're pulling up to a training venue in a Maserati and
not the beat up forward.
Exactly.
No, but that's the thing. The thing is, when you spoke around the NIL stuff, who people have around them right now coming out as kids is going to be a big thing. Like some of the conversations I've had with kids that I don't want to say played a massive role in, but I've played a role in what they're doing, is my wording has been, you're at college now, use that to your advantage when you come out of it. So that if you go and sign with a Sydney or a Brisbane, wherever, you might be able to actually set yourself up in that, where most people are just trying to find their way through, I'm on this amount of money, how am I going to live, what am I experiencing? It's like, use what you've made to then speed up the next process, where some are just trying to still figure it out. But if they've got the wrong people around them, it'll go the other way really quickly, and I think it'll be messy for some.
It's a conversation I've had with people at the Center of Excellence too. They're trying to prepare these kids. They're trying to keep them as sort of grounded as possible. But they know that you can't hold these guys for as long, because there are agents who are going to come in and all of a sudden they have control. These guys turn 14 years old. They have an agent already.
Yeah,
because the agent is going to get them into college. and an agent's going to get them, the super high level dudes are going to make upwards of $5 million US net. Like, it's so much money. And so it's an interesting trade-off, right? You don't get to develop players as early as you once would in the NBL, but when you do get them, are they more prepared to give you an actual impact? That's a question.
And the transfer portal, I know you mentioned that the ability to jump schools, and you're right. Like, it's you face some adversity, you change, but it also may help some of these players where they might find themselves in a different basketball situation than they once thought. The reason why we were able to get Alex too is Gonzaga, they had recruited over the top of him, and so would have impacted his basketball journey and development there. And so he wanted to withdraw out of that situation. So you might find guys that go somewhere and things change over that 12 months and they go, well, actually now I want to chase a better basketball situation here. So it's not always about the money, but yeah, the changes I think are happening very quickly, and a lot of people are just trying to keep up.
How much tougher is it for GMs? So I spoke with an agent yesterday who said there are no longer many, if any, scenarios where the NBL can competitively lure a collegiate athlete back until their eligibility is exhausted. So the way this was put was an NBL team used to have a shot at the guy out of the center of excellence at 18, no longer the case. As a freshman who picked the wrong school at 19, no longer the case. A guy who had a breakout sophomore season at 20, NBL teams aren't getting that guy because that guy's going to play in a big market school for $1 million. A guy who finished his degree at a year early at 21, not getting those guys. So you're not getting that guy at any stage of their collegiate career. You're not going to steal guys anymore. Yeah. Does that make it harder for NBL GMs when they're always only competing for the same pool of guys at the sort of end of their career, their collegiate career?
I think it impacts it for probably the next 3 years till all of those players are coming out of college.
Catch up.
Those catches. So right now, the player that would be coming out in year 2 is going to stay for 3 more years. And so I feel like there's going to be this next 2-year window, there's going to be a lot less. And we saw it even last year. There's not many college athletes other than the seniors that are coming out of college. So I feel like once you get past that period, it'll be the same flow of players coming out. It's just they're all 24 years old. What it would impact is your development players, because generally you were able to have a pool of players that were the college athletes, 21, 22. They're a development player for 3 or 4 years. The development player in the NBL must be 25 before the end of the season. So what you're going to find, I think, is at the back end of rosters and your development players, you're not having that same set of players. You're getting a 17-year-old that's in between high school and going to college.
You're just getting the gap year guys, right?
Yep.
Yeah. The other thing is, can the Next Stars program continue to effectively exist with NIL a bit? Purely from it's very difficult to compete financially to get not just the Australians, but if the Next Stars program wants to go and get a top 20 recruit, are they in a position to pay $5 million US net for that guy? It's more than the.
Well, I think you're looking at other selling points, right? You're going on the track record, the success of previous Next Stars. You're trying to go the lifestyle. You're pitching the opportunity to play in a grown man's competition under a more pro-like off the court environment. It helps you adapt in that regard, but it's getting more challenging. I mean, obviously we see the Next Stars, there's not as many this season, right? So I mean, you're faced with these challenges, but you find a way. Like, if you wanted to continue, you'll find a way. But the money out there, sure, it's going to be a major incentive, but there will always be others who look the other way and will look at the opportunity to actually compete.
Yeah, and that's what I think. You kind of lottery picks in those guys who are like a Dash, right? He's expected to go in the first round. Money is important, but it's not all, because if he does the right things now, he'll make more money than college. Not even a thought. So I think there's an era of those guys who you're pretty sure they're going to be a first round draft pick. There's been proof that coming here works. They're the guys that you might still be able to convince, because the basketball situation development is still there, but the money won't be as high as if you go to college, where we're still not sure that some of those kids can go to college and get lost in the system. Well, I mean, it doesn't work.
If you look at the numbers, though, say you weren't projected to be, say you come over here as a high second, you perform well, you get bumped up to a mid-first or even a late lottery. You've almost accumulated that money at the most important stage, which is the NBA.
Yeah, the flip side to that is, I think we'll see examples of guys who do that then go and get, like, don't really believe that their stock is that, and then go to college instead.
Yeah.
But that's also the flexibility around the NCAA rules. They might come in and do a next star for a year or 2 years and realize, no, that didn't work out. My path to the NBA isn't there, so I am going to go to college.
Yep.
Yeah.
We saw it.
Or it did work out, and I'm still going to go cash a check.
Exactly.
I'm going to go.
They might want to take that year.
Yep.
And I think you're spot on, Case, about those high-end, those lottery picks. You look at Cadee, right? And while it's different timing of when he wouldn't have been able to capitalize on the NCAA and NIL stuff, but if that was now, he took the right path. Taking next star in this league was the best for him to get to where he needed to, drafted in the first round in the lottery, and then to what he's doing now. And you're right on Dash. Dash could have made 3 or 4 times the money, if not more, than what he's making now. But if this is proving to be the best basketball situation, you're right. 3 years into his NBA rookie season, he's made more than he would have, and then that leverages into what his next contract is in the NBA. So I think it's all situational. I think you're right. It's probably those middle tier guys that maybe they're the ones not coming here anymore. So I think it exists, but it probably only exists for 3 or 4 guys a year rather than the 8 or 9 that we had the other year.
There are whispers of a salary cap within colleges and college basketball. Do you think, I feel like that could stem some of the, like, unless Pandora's box is already open too much, which it feels like it is, but it feels like that could maybe stem some of the bleeding a little bit when it comes to the impact on the NBL.
I think the revenue sharing makes it hard because there's so much football money, and that money has to be reallocated to other sports, and that's where it gets difficult.
Going from keeping up with trying to recruit next stars to recruiting imports in general.
Hello.
Right? This is a conversation I have a lot with people, not just around the NBL, head coaches, GMs, but around world basketball. And it's, how does the NBL functionally keep up with the rest of the world? So I'll throw this at you. You have the Japanese B League continues to grow. They're about to have this sort of B League Premier. That's about to be sort of start up properly. Instead of 2 imports on the floor at the same time, they'll be able to have 3 imports on the floor at the same time. There are some whispers of potentially adding a 4th import. I don't know how legitimate they are, but the B League could add a 4th import. Money in Europe continues to grow. NBA Europe is likely coming in 2027, so that takes away some prospective imports from the NBL. And then the third two-way in the NBA continues to exist. And so not only is it the guys who are going to be on those 2 ways, but it's the 10 people in each, 10 to 30 people in each market who think they're in contention for that 2-way, so they won't sign in the NBL. So what is the way for the NBL to keep up with the rest of the world as far as being able to recruit high-quality imports out here?
Who wants to take this one?
I start first before you guys get in depth. I think the one thing we will always have is our season runs at the perfect time for guys who want to come here to set themselves up to go back. You go to Europe, you go to Japan, there's no bouncing back to the NBA, right? That's just not happening. You'd never see it as much anymore. It might be the next season where someone could say, hey, listen, I want to go to a right situation. Australia's very similar to the States. People love it out there. I'm done in Feb, March if we do well, and I can bounce back to a roster or a G League. I think that will always be the advantage. The money side, as we just spoke about college, is going to play a part.
I think the evolution of the style of play also in Australia, especially for guards, I think NBA people, and you probably know better than me, Chris, that they would look favorably on the style of play. I think it gives a better indication of how a player's game will transfer to the NBA. I don't know what big European clubs may think about that. Sometimes I know they view our free style of basketball not in the highest regard, but we have had players still go over there and perform well.
Yeah, I feel like we're right in between with the NBA's here and Europe's here. We're right smack bang in the middle. I think we play a little bit of both. But off your comment about the timing of our season, I think, honestly, that's how we've pitched imports in the past. And, come here, play in a beautiful city, beautiful country, 1 to 2 games a week for 7 months. Finish up in Feb or March, and then go get your Puerto Rican money. Go to China, go to Japan, go top up. And at the end of the year, when those teams are looking at the average USD net per month is much higher than at the start of the year. So they might get to the end of the year and go, I made the exact same, but I spent 7 months in Sydney
Right.
versus
Yeah.
10 months in China, and I get 7 here and 3 in Puerto Rico, and I made the same amount of money. And they look at that. So we pitch them on, hey, it's come here, and then we'll top up you have a great year and you top up.
And
This
may sound counterintuitive because I came here as an import, but I think at times we're overly lenient to our imports when it comes to performances. And we're probably one of the friendlier leagues in the world in terms of your job security. And that is rare around the world. Imports get chopped like that all around the world. But if you come here and play decent, you don't even need to play great. The likelihood of you retaining your roster spot is very high. And that just adds to the point. Your money is not really in jeopardy. Then you go, do your thing, top up postseason.
The fear is that there will be so much money overseas now that the NBL has to be able to pay players that little bit extra. What you're saying is entirely legitimate, right? It's come here, you get to live on a beach. Every team is on a city with a beach. You get paid on time. It's comfortable living. It's the closest thing to America that you're going to find outside of America. But it's more, can NBL teams pay that little bit extra to get them in the door and then say, hey, you will top up elsewhere?
Go ahead. I always wonder where it comes from. Like where is the source of the requisite funding to get, whether it's, to strengthen your third import position or to go out there and get that high level player like Bryce Cotton? What's the source of the money?
Well, mine was going to be the other way of, I know players and some imports who have been very good in our league, but then they've gone to Japan and it's just the money, right? They're like, if Australia was that little bit more, I would sacrifice this to go there, but I'm taking too much of a haircut. Whereas some of them are like, well, if I was getting what A, B, and C are getting paid, maybe I could actually, to your point, say, I'm going to stay in the NBL for a few more years rather than use it as a platform to now go and get paid some crazy money.
And when you say where's it coming from, in the 7 years I'm here, the total cash allocation for teams, I feel like it's doubled. Every year, jumped. Every 3 years, there's a huge deal that's kind of brought then the bottom end up, and everyone's matching it. You saw that with a couple of these off-season signings for local players, but it's the same with imports. And so when you say where's it coming from, I think it's willing owners. We've got great owners in our league, but they're dipping into their pockets, and most of these teams lose money. So that's where I think it comes from. It's how willing is an owner to put a team together that they want to win and leverage that success into commercial opportunities. But at the same time, it's how willing is your owner to dig deep, to have to pay more. And that's the challenging thing when you see the B League rise in the way it is. How much more are they going to need to allocate in? What does that mean for the salary cap jumps and all of those things? It has a flow-on effect to where the league will be in 5 or 10 years' time when a minimum contract's $180,000 versus, where it was 5 years ago.
The one thing the B League will have to prove still is, and amongst players, there's always been a thought, if I choose to go there now, I'm writing off the NBA.
It's over.
I'm done. The NBA's out. Yeah. Some have been unwilling to because they didn't want to say, they wanted to keep that hope. Some have got to the point where they're like, okay, I'm now willing to say that's done. I'm going to go there and make money. How long does that last? Are we going to start to see some go there? They haven't proven it yet. So that's always going to be one thing. We'll have those guys that hold on to that. I'm an NBA player. I just need to prove it. I don't know the money's going to be enough because there's still a belief you go there and that's it.
What about from a competitive point of view? Like as athletes, we want that part stimulated and satisfied. We want to know that, yeah, it's great to get paid, but if you feel like you're playing against guys that you can just dominate, you're not getting that challenge, your skills can deteriorate. Where do you measure like the Japanese league against the NBL? How would the best Japanese team do against our champion?
I think they do really well. Again, I feel like their B1 have a lot of really good teams at the high end.
Yep.
So I think that they do well. I think our league is played differently. You're right. And I think the imports are different. The only benefit the NBL has is typically Japanese imports, Japanese teams are going to bring in import bigs because they've got a raft of local guards and they're only allowed 2 or 3 imports. That's why you see so many Australian bigs going to go play over there or import bigs playing over there. So I don't think it's really going to affect the import of local guards or wings, I think really your big men that are playing over there now, which we've talked about for years, a local Australian big, like that's why Geordie Hunter is Geordie Hunter, because he is such a unique specimen here. It's hard to keep hold of these local bigs and escape, them escaping the country and not coming back.
So a few things. One, I think the best NBL team would kill the best Japanese team purely from the local talent. The local talent of the NBL is so much higher than the local talent in Japan. This GM I spoke to, and this is something that we know, 4s and 5s are where Japan really steals your prospective imports and even locals. Keanu Pinder, Yanni Wetzel. These guys are just going over
back
there.
to Mooney,
Nick Kay. There's a lot of these guys are. Angus Brandt's been over there for ages. Reece Vegas now over there.
And Brandt, here's a
guy
guy I really liked, and we never saw the best of him here in Australia.
Because they're going to question is like, why? Like he's making so much money over there. You might as well.
Xavier was over there. Hiram Harris. There's a list of guys.
The Hirams, it's the top-notch guys we've got to worry about. But what about the next level of bigs who are right now backup bigs who play a big role in our teams? Now they start to say, oh, I could go over there and make way more than what I am here.
If the NBL can't keep those sorts of players, then that's a problem, right? Because those are the sorts of players that lift the floor of the entire league.
It eats away at the fabric teams and the league.
And then you spoke about some of the players over the past few seasons who their contracts have sort of lifted everyone else's. Like you said, it's like you didn't sign Xavier Cooks to $1 million deal. You would
do it again,
and you were a part of that, and I think that's an important thing. So then the question is, where does that money come from? But outside of willing owners, and it's a salary cap that can be quite restrictive because of the luxury tax.
100%, and we lured him out of Japan. So you have to do that, and you do it on big deals. But then you're right, that lifted up the Jack McVay deals, that lifted up the JLA deals, and so you almost set a new standard of it. But that's what you have to do for bigs, and again, those they're bigs that you need to lure back. And I'm not saying it's easy to go find local guards because I know that that's also challenging. But local bigs, losing them, you're right. It hasn't really happened to the backup and the third string players. And if they start doing that, then I think it's going to be really challenging for some teams.
Yeah. So let's talk a clear-cut example, which is someone like Keanu Pinder, who was making good amount of money here in the NBL, not quite $1 million Aussie gross, but sort of between that $500 and $1 million range, and now all of a sudden he's making around the sort of $1 million US net mark over in Japan, right? So having a guy who I think probably wants to be in the NBL, what's like the sweet spot in convincing someone like that hey, there's money over there, but we can pay you this amount of money to stay here and to keep doing your thing here? Like, what's the sweet spot there?
That's a tough one because you never know what really stimulates a guy. Is it being on a good championship team? Is it being in a particular city? Is it being around family? It's so difficult to know. But with that level of disparity in the money, if it was me, it'd be very hard to throw any other reasons out there that would not make me go after that money. Now,
they're functionally 4 or 5xing the money. That's the conversation.
Some of them you got to let go and experience it too.
Exactly.
And then realize, hang on, then they might know what the number is.
Let them want to come back.
Because the number might be pretty good, but they're like, it's not worth it, I'm going over. Then all of a sudden that number you offered me, is that still there? Because now I've done this for a year and maybe that is worth taking and I can still come back here now after. And
Jace, I'm sure you hear the lifestyle stories, you can only eat fast food. You only have access to this. You can't do this. It is a significant change to what guys are used to here with their clubs and with their lives.
That's probably the difference why Japan's taken off so much, is because I feel like that used to be the case more so with China. But now everyone, talking to some of these guys, and it's the lifestyle there. It's clean. It's great food. They're cared for at these teams that are run real well and brand new facilities with generous on it. Like, you're looking at that and you go, yeah, it's so. I think you two are best to talk about from being a ex-player perspective. But if I look at it, yeah, if they go experience it, but every year it's, do I do one more year here and if I can make 5x the money, I do that for 1 or 2 more years. I set the rest of my life up. I'll come back to the NBL. And some of them are in their prime and they go, I might run this through till I'm 35 and then come back. The Angus Brandts, the Brock Modems, the world that go there and then they don't come back.
This is where the college part can play a factor here, right? You're going to have guys who are going to make 400, 500, 600 US a year who are only ever going to be an NBL role player. So now they come back and they've made some money. So now they have this portion of, I get to live back home, driving a nice car. I bought an apartment off my college. Yeah. I'm getting paid. Like, that's a nice position to be in. So now maybe there's actually going to be a transition. We might not see it for a little while, where some people have made some money that now they say, I just want to be a known player in the NBL and play at home. That could also play a part.
That's a really good point. And again, that's where I think what's so important with these college kids, I know we're going back to it, is the development. They've got to choose the right basketball path. The money is important, I get it, but finding the right basketball situation, not being lured in by the dollars. And that's why I think it's really important to get the right advice, because, again, the development pathways is going to help leverage into your long-term pro career if that's what you want to do. You kind of got to marry up both. And again, I think some guys, Austin Rapp's one who's done well with it because he took the basketball route, and that's helped him financially, and he's crushing it this year. He comes back in 3 or 4 years. You're right. He's got money in the bank. He can choose the right basketball pathway that's best for him, and he can manage the NBL for longer because he's made some good money.
So that's Japan taking prospective NBL players. Europe is doing the same thing. We saw this season. Amari Moore was signed with the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. He goes signs a deal that I was told was €800 net. Right? You're looking 3 or 4, if more, times what he would have made at the Phoenix. Right, so these guys are just getting poached from these leagues that have more money. Question to you: this one general manager I spoke to last night told me the amount of players who he loses to Exhibit 10s. We're about to sign this guy, but there's an Exhibit 10 on the table for him, and he really wants to do it, but his agent says, "Nah, it's probably your best option just to sign an NBL team. It's probably the better pathway." How many of those do you almost get over the line, and then there's maybe a training camp spot here. There's a two-way spot that's open there for me.
It's more the two ways, I think, that pull the rug out from under you. Exhibit 10s are there, but
what's the money around the Exhibit 10 compared to a two-way?
A lot, a big difference. An Exhibit 10 is, I think it's between 80 and 100 US.
Yeah,
and they get housing, whereas a two-way is now looking at 600,000-700,000 US. So it's very different. But an Exhibit 10, you're going to play in the G League for at least 2 months. So the requirement is you go to training camp, you may have a shot at it, but 99% of these players go there with the view.
You sign an E10, they waive it immediately.
You waive it almost immediately. You're going to the G League for a couple of months. So you have to know that. But in Exhibit 10, you get that extra amount than what a normal G League player makes. So that's a way. If you want an NBA dream, you're not taking E10 unless you're chasing the NBA. So one of these guys that may just want to put on an NBA jersey, I get it. But for the other ones, the two-way money, again, it used to be 300, now it's 700. It's a different conversation when you're trying to recruit these guys.
And Chris, that just reminds me of another little point that may be conducive to bringing imports over to Australia at a reduced salary, is that some guys from certain demographics simply want a place that looks a lot more like America.
Good food, great weather, English speaking,
paid on time. Culture is broadly American. Like, that's a thing.
That's the part that's the Europe, just to finish. The pay thing is still live in Europe. There's so many dudes that I didn't get paid for. Like, right. It's happening right now. Like, I've heard from different people, like, didn't get paid for a month. Someone, Matt Hurt, I think he's just about to leave. He didn't get paid for 40 days. Now they get to leave and still get their money. But those things don't happen in Australia.
That's where NBA Europe becomes an interesting proposition, because the NBA will pay their players, and they're in interesting, palatable cities too. You'll have a team in London, one in Manchester. These are all big cities run by the NBA. So you're not going to have any of those sort of awkward Euro team shenanigans of, I didn't get paid, I've got to go to bat to go and fight for my money. With the NBA Europe, I think changes the landscape a lot.
Will Europeans follow it like they do their own?
If they get the history, if they get those key teams, so who are we looking at? Barcelona, are the 2 Spanish teams in?
Just think of every major city in Europe.
Yeah. How do you not?
Yeah, because I think 2 or 3 of the big EuroLeague teams, their contract expires with the EuroLeague in time for the inception of NBA Europe.
Yeah, This does bleed into expansion, like the general quality of the league. But I want to ask you one thing very quickly. One GM brought up the idea to me of ways to sort of pay players slightly more while avoiding the salary cap in a way that you sort of keep your integrity. So one idea was bonuses that are not taxed and also not capped, but are also based on team-based outcomes. So right now, bonuses are that they count toward your salary cap, and they're taxed, correct?
Other than the playoff bonuses, you can pay up to 7% of a player's player value into their playoff bonus, but it has to be tied to finals.
So how would you...
Any team or individual-based outcome
Yeah.
hits the player's value if they're achieved.
Okay. How would you feel about those finals-based bonuses not being counted toward the tax and also not having a cap? So you can, let's say, hey, we're going to give you a 40% finals bonus, right? And it doesn't count toward the cap. Do you feel like owners would be willing to do that? And do you think that's a way to introduce more money into the flow of things without reducing the quality of the competition, because these are finals-based bonuses, right?
I actually think it does. It's counterintuitive to the parity of the league, because then you have owners who may have deeper pockets, bigger market teams that go, hey, if we win a championship, I'll give you $1 million. They might, certain teams can't do that. And so I think it makes it harder. They are able to recruit players. You're able to get players for less and you stack a team because we're going to win a championship and I'm going to make an extra $1 million. I think it actually poses some traps.
Outcomes, though.
Yeah, it is, and it's interesting also, Olgun, because it starts to get to the point, do owners not want to pay the tax because that is going into that league pool? But if they knew they were paying extra and it was going directly to a player, does that impact how they view paying?
So, for example, like I know one owner who doesn't want to pay into the luxury tax because of the optics of I'm paying Larry and I don't like to pay taxes, right?
I don't think it's that. Like I haven't experienced
that's like a one-off owner,
but it's a payment you make that's going to a pool that you don't naturally see the asset itself, right? If you're paying a player, you know what you're paying for. Whereas if you're putting it into a subsidy account, you're like, how can we reduce that the most? And I'd rather make that payment elsewhere. But in terms of paying players more, I've done it, and I've structured in previous deals and current ones where if you win an MVP, you get, here's a big bonus for you. And our owners have signed off on that, are willing to do that, because if I'm paying that player $250 US net, if they get an extra 50 for winning MVP, they're worth the 300 that you're paying them. And so you almost, you put that in 7 now. You have to wear the tax. You know that's coming. But if you get that player and they've won an MVP, they're worth every dollar you're paying. So I feel like they exist. At least we've been factoring it into our old agreements. But I think if you make it where it's so obscene, where they can make so much money, if a team wants to do that, I think it should hit the tax. You hate doing it, but again, if they win it and they achieve it, then I think it's worthwhile, right?
What about if there was like a pool of money or a cap to it where it's like all teams have the same amount to spend? Up to you if you do it. Because incentive-based stuff can work. And like you said, maybe only a few teams have to pay it because they don't make it.
But also keep it outcome-based. Don't have it be, you got to play 10 games and you get a bonus.
Make finals.
Because at the very least, that keeps the quality of the league relatively high, because this guy's going to be competing at a high level until the end of the season.
I've personally, and I think it is a preference by the GM themselves, but I personally want to stay away from individual-based bonuses, only because I think if you put in their average 18 points a game, you find players play differently if they're chasing a goal for themselves rather than winning. I like winning-based incentives, right? It's qualifying for playoffs, for semifinals, finals,
home finals.
It's exactly like I would have ones in there that it's coming first on the ladder, right? Or it's winning X number of games. And so I feel like winning and team-based incentives are easier. Other than the individual ones, first all NBL or MVP, they're still playing the way that they're playing. They're not.
And they're only for certain guys.
Exactly. Too, right? Like you're not putting that in there for everyone.
Yeah. Was it Jason Capono who had like a 3-point percentage bonus in his contract and then didn't shoot
his last game?
He didn't shoot. Yeah.
What about just on time? What about I don't know if you're going to take this further with questions, third-party stuff that like the NRL do, like third-party agreements where sponsors can play a part in it. The other part is, what about living and cars and things? Like, stuff is getting more expensive.
So living accommodation right now, there's like a fixed number, correct?
Yeah, if you provide a car, it hits your cap at 10,000. Our cost team's a lot more than that. If you provide an accommodation, it hits the cap at $350 a week. It's much more than that.
Yeah.
So what's happened now, and you're spot on, where you'd have to, every year we regroup and try and figure out what benefits are provided these players, because 10 years ago it was much easier to do. Rent in Sydney is very different to rent in Cairns and Adelaide. And not only that, the higher cost, FBT, all the taxes that come along with it. You pay a guy to live, it's costing you another $50,000-$60,000 for the season. Whereas I don't think people understand the true costs that come with that. So I think those really help get deals over the line, and they're almost expected. In the import deal, you would know, they arrive here and you've got a car and you've got accommodation, you have it's all the things that you expect, and you get off the plane and you're ready to go. But for the other ones, I know it helps locals, but it's
really a little more expensive for the
All right, let's talk expansion a little bit. It's something that NBL really wants. I think their sweet spot is 2 more teams. Now, where those teams are is almost secondary. We can have that conversation, but it's more, do we feel the league is ready for it? When we look at the talent in the league today, when we look at, the Cairns Taipans being where they are, for example, and United at the top, there is a big difference between those 2 teams and how they're operating. And I think a lot of it is largely because of the roster. Is the league ready to add 2 more teams to the mix and still have a reasonable amount of parity across the board?
I think so. If you're asking just from a talent, I think it's almost like if you build it, they will come. If you got 2 more teams in the competition, the clubs will find the talent. They'll make it work. And remember, if you get your imports right, one of the main reasons imports were brought out here early in the day, and the reason the structure is the way it was, is because they are supposed to lift the play of the locals. And that has happened over decades here in Australia, to the point now where the vast majority, Jason, you've seen the change. The vast majority of imports almost play a role here.
Yeah.
In terms of being superstars on their teams. That was not the case in the 90s. So I truly believe in the depth of the talent, and I'm probably skewed to the optimistic side in terms of, do we have the volume of players? I believe we do. Obviously, there are challenges, but I still think local players want to play in the NBL.
Do you feel 2 more teams would dilute all of the teams that little bit, and then including those other teams? You think of guys who are maybe the 3rd best local on their team now, all of a sudden have to be the best local on another team. If you just do them, if you just go through every team and pick that guy, like if you're starting a Gold Coast team or a Canberra team, you look at it.
Love to start a Gold Coast team.
I know you would.
No, but I think too, and you've been doing it. Some of it is actually on the recruitment and how people put teams together. I don't think some.
Do you want to work at it? Like, that's the thing. But get out there and see.
And are you going to make the right decisions too? Like, I actually think some of the roster builds aren't actually on the talent depth. It's on what's been put in together. Doesn't make sense.
Like the balance and all that.
It doesn't make sense. But I think there's some guys now, even if we said, righto, what have some teams got that could play a bigger role who are kind of hidden at times? There's some guys around the league that could step in and start amongst the right imports. And all of a sudden you go, that's a great starting position as a group. So my nervousness is the college, because now you might not get some guys, but there's also a whole heap of college kids who aren't really enjoying it, where if you said, hey guys, instead of coming back and being my 10th guy, you can come back and be my 7th.
So the question is then, if that's the case, is that team just bad?
Maybe
the quality of that team is lower.
I don't.
Ordinarily, that's a 10th guy in a row.
But I don't know if that's the quality of that team. The fear is the quality of the entire league, because one of the challenges I think you face is, you're right, when you factor in college, I think it's the sum of all parts, college, international, we're already got challenges around recruiting the 10th, 11th guy to come. You add in 1 or 2 new teams, there's another 20 locals that the league needs to find. What happens? And in that window, it becomes a feeding frenzy for the top end guys for that new team. So I remember when Tassie was coming in, when Southeast was coming in, we made sure that we locked up every one of our players or hiring guys. I think we had 8 players contracted that year when Tassie were coming in because we knew that they were coming out buying and they were going to get players and they were going to pull them away. And that's the jump you see in the next phase of salaries, and everyone kind of lifts to that. So if you factor those things in where you have to find 10 or 20 new locals, you're already losing some to not coming out of college, and then you're losing some to international. Where's the
all the other teams that can dilute?
So if you're a starter until your backups are gone from your team gets worse. I think over the course of the league, I think does the talent across the league. So I feel like my view is if expansion needs to come, it needs to come in kind of tranches.
Yes, I think one
next, and then you got to wait a couple of years. You can't be dropping 2 or 3 new teams in quick succession. I feel like it needs to come in 2 or 3 year cycles. And then second to that, I feel like the roster discussion in terms of what you're doing, you might need to factor in adding a 4th import.
Let's do this conversation. So firstly, I spoke with one GM who said, if there's expansion, then nailing the 3 imports would become almost non-negotiable, right? And we've already seen how difficult it is for some teams
to be, though.
Right, but we've seen 6 imports already cut for varying reasons. But not every team. Not every team.
Prior, some of the people making decisions now.
I agree with you. A lot of this is a decision making thing. I don't think I think the imports are out there. I just think a lot of people don't know where to look.
Right.
That's a part. It's a decision making problem. I also spoke with a head coach in the NBL. He said this. He said, in order for our league to keep up with other leagues around the world, we have to increase the number of imports to 4.
Yeah.
And then I spoke to a different head coach. He said, other top leagues have 6 or 7 or 8 imports. Japan is talking about increasing to 4. Our league has done an amazing job of being recognized as a top global league, but moves must be made to make sure we are keeping up with other projects like the ones in Japan, NBA, Europe, etc. And I think especially if you add 2 more teams, the potential for the dilution of talent across the league, if you add an import to each, an extra import, right? A 4th import.
And they can all play on the court at the same time?
Well, that's a matter of discussion.
Yeah.
And so I've been up on this tree for about 8 to 10 months.
A lot of people are.
Where I've been talking about the 4th import. I believe so that it doesn't encroach upon the local development and the local opportunity that it's 4 imports on roster, 3 on court.
I think it's an awkward way to play and coach basketball.
But it's done so regularly. Like some leagues
It
around the world, Olgun, like you have to start. I know this was a way that they did in the women's game in Poland. You had to start an under 21 player.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different ways that people are attacking this situation because the problem isn't just specific to Australia. Like there are a lot of leagues going through this as well. And it's interesting now because I saw Turkey, I think at the end of last season, really up their number of imports. And I kind of see us in that Turkey. I think we're competing with a lot of the same American-born players as the Turkish league does.
And I also don't think you expect those 4 imports to be the highest 4 highest paid players or the 4 best players on the team. You look at Sydney only has 2 imports this year. Melbourne United, the local talent that they have on their team surpasses their import talent. I feel like it gives teams flexibility. If you choose to go down that route, you have that opportunity, but you don't have to. I don't think that 4th or even 3rd import is going to be one of your top paid. You might be able to utilize those as backup imports.
But I do like it for a startup.
Right.
It gives you that ability to potentially go out there and be very competitive. But I want to hear your thoughts, though, on what did you think about the 4 on the roster, 3 on the court, or would you just open it up?
I just open it up only because I feel like coaches in our league having to manage those rotations.
Yeah.
If you have a roster of 15 or 16, maybe it's easier, but you've got 11 guys. So I even think if you're adding an import, I also think you need to discuss a 12th spot, which may talk into the trade piece. I know we'll touch on later, but I feel like there's already so much for them to be focused on. If you're managing guys on the court based on minutes and rotation and foul trouble, I just think it adds another layer to it. It's something you got to explain to kids and families that might not understand why is he not playing these guys. If a team wants to pay 4 imports to play, I feel like then let them do it. And I feel like the local talent in our league speaks for itself. They're going to play no matter what. I don't think imports are going to come in and replace our top-end local talent.
So something in my notes I said if 4 imports, maybe a 12th local spot. So technically, you're not taking a job away, right? That job still exists.
My biggest concern isn't the roster spot. It's if you're a kid, you speak about development now. If you're a kid growing up in Australia and you sit and watch your local Sydney Kings play and there's 4 imports on the court, and we've got naturalized imports too. So you're watching 5 imports. Where's my future life? Because NBL 1-2, if we factor back to that, people aren't running that like it should be now. People are spending too much money. It's not being used as a development for some of our juniors going through.
Correct.
So now we're going to lose kids to college, overseas early, to high schools. I get the concept of does it diminish the level, but if you jump to that quickly, my only nervousness is what does it look like for kids coming through?
So then that brings you to the broader question of what is the NBL for? Is this an entertainment product, or is this an Australian league for Australians to
We're
look
not
at?
going to be the NBA.
It's not going to be the NBA.
You
but
look at this.
you need
league,
to
it is
compete for
entertaining.
entertainment.
It is entertaining.
As
It's
is-
dramatic.
All of its
And-
money comes from the
Yeah.
entertainment aspect of it.
Yeah.
Right. We speak about it all the time. And so what is the priority? Is it for it to be the highest level entertainment product possible? If so, then man, have 8 imports, right? If that's what the goal is.
No,
As in
balance.
Okay, there's a balance, right?
Yeah.
But what's the preference?
I think
Finding the balance
we
between
could
those.
potentially lose some of our Australian talent.
That we cannot lose and this sounds crazy coming from me, but we can't lose the Aussiness of the league. And part of it comes from the fact that we don't play a lot of games. Like I try and describe to people around the world, especially my American friends, that it's like watching the NFL in basketball, the NBL. Every game means so much like it does in the NFL. You cannot afford to go to sleep for a couple of weeks or things change drastically for your season. And right now, I think we're in a very good position, but I would love to see that 4th import spot, add the local spot, and now you start to open it up and maybe get, but then how do you mix the next stars into that kettle?
Next stars, I feel like, is a completely different conversation, which I don't know if that's even part of this. I agree with Jess. I agree with you. It depends on, Larry Kesselman runs the NBL and it is an entertainment product. So you have to make sure that you fulfill that. It is also a league that young Australians and young Kiwis look at as this is my developmental pathway. This is a shining light that I can look at. So there has to be a balance there, which is why I don't think the answer is 9 imports, right?
No.
But there was once 2 imports and it went into 3 and it's been okay.
Yeah, and then we slowly slid in the next star, and now we're sliding in a 4th import.
But now,
But no, not every team will get 4 imports. Like we have a team right now that isn't even using its final spot.
You can give teams what if you give teams the option? You have 5 spots. It can be either 4 imports or 4. It can be 5 combined marquees and imports with a maximum of 4
I think
imports.
you would look at, as Chris said, 1 team first. Let's get 1 team so we can open it up. Let's look what we can do. Like maybe there's like more flexibility around your marquees if they're Australians. So we can maybe go and bring a Brock Modem or a Nick Kay or those guys back. I would explore that first and see what it looks like before we start just saying, here's 4 imports, here's whatever.
Yeah, fair.
But if it gets to the point, though, where it's like, hey, guys, for this to work, we actually need it. Well, now you've seen the evidence of we need it. Otherwise, it's going to suffer.
Yeah. Keep in mind, this is a conversation that is happening across the league. GMs, head coaches, a lot of people are for this. So whether the ABPA comes to the table and agrees to something like that, feels like that's a no at this point, but it's a conversation that a lot of people are having right now.
It's fair enough.
It's because of where world basketball is going. And there has to be an ability to keep up with that. One of the other things that could add to the entertainment aspect of the league is potential trades. Now, this is a fun topic to have because it's cool to throw stuff in like a trade machine and put a guy who's not playing minutes here and throw him there. But functionally,
Can I throw one out?
sure.
We're going straight.
We're going straight Sydney Kings too, baby.
Yeah. Who's your least favorite player on your roster?
No.
Okay.
Look, hey, I'm going. My first proposal is Bull Quall, Sean Bruce, and Spurgeon for Tyrell Harrison.
3 for 1. Does that work money wise? No.
But what just the overall concept? What do you think? What do you think, Jace? Before Chris is
Dice.
no dice.
No, I love Tyrell, but I'm
No dice.
going with our guys.
Nope. Okay.
As the most recent player on this panel.
So my view of it was I understand it, but we don't. So for me, right, I find a place to rent and I lock into a 12-month contract and I'm paying $700, $1,000, whatever it is per week. When I get traded, who's paying for that? Because
It's a great question.
I have to now buy myself out of my lease.
Yep.
Then I have to pay for myself to move, find a new place to lease, which is hard these days. So unless clubs are going to start fronting that and paying that, I can't make it work. I'm now broke.
No. It's a great question. So in all of this, the last couple of years, I'm all for trades. I actually think it's exciting for the league. There were periods in these last couple of years where throughout the season, you need flexibility to be able to make changes. Signing a roster in April and having that roster for 11 months is really difficult because you don't know how the team mesh, how you're performing, injuries, replacement players, all of those things are an unknown. So you get into the season, winning a championship, there's a lot of luck in that. A lot of things got to go your way. And so having no flexibility middle of the season to make changes other than cutting a guy, paying him out and going and find someone else, there needs to be, and I think that as an entertainment product, that's why the NBA is so exciting because changes to roster revitalize fan bases and teams' interest or also their ability to make the playoffs. And again, it changes the long-term setup of that team. I put something into the league and a couple of us worked on it at a GM level and a commission level is what can we put to the league to take to the WPA around a proposal for that. One of the main things we focused on is exactly what you said. What happens to a player? And I feel what we suggested was there's a threshold. So anyone earning under X amount of money, they're at no worse off, right? So if they have to buy themselves out of the lease, the incoming team pays for it. If they have to move or their family stays there, the incoming team pays for their housing. So that player under a certain threshold is no worse off. And what that number is flexible, right? If it's 150 or 2. So anyone earning under that, because I know a lot of players will going to go live in a cheaper city for the same deal because, again, living in Sydney versus living in Adelaide or Cairns is different prospects. So if the incoming team's paying for that and a player's no worse off, it's a basketball situation, right?
I would have put my hand up and said, if anyone wants to trade for me, like that's a thing. And I do agree. Like the whole idea of it, I think is great. Because if you could right now say, we're Cairns and we need this really bad, who can we try and go to? I think it'd make things like this even more excellent because you're talking about it. It's just how that works around it. Kids in school. But if you're not worse off, if the moving part is kind of sorted for you and that changes the whole thing.
And it's not only driven by the club and it's a one-way directional thing. I remember when I had 3 years ago on my contract in Townsville and I was unhappy and I had no other course of action other than go to the owner and ask for a release. Coming off of near MVP seasons after, and I had to go with 3 years and ask to leave, and then I became vilified for leaving Townsville. He did grant me my release, but asking for a trade is a much softer way to kind of make sure both parties are looked after in some form instead of me just leaving and being, the optics are much better via trade, even though people may not know that because we're not accustomed to it here.
So in your model that you would have put forward to the league, do players have to consent to the move?
No.
So that's where it becomes challenging because if they consent, that it reduces the team's ability. And I get it. I understand that a player they want to help choose their basketball journey, but at the same time, a team should have that flexibility. I think it's no.
Well, are no trade contracts allowed?
100%.
Okay.
That's where I think that comes. It's all negotiable, right?
Right.
You factor in what the NBA do with the trade kicker. So someone might negotiate, say, if you trade me, you pay me another 15%.
Correct.
Again, that might benefit a player. You might find a player who goes, I want to be traded now and make some more money and my expenses are covered.
Yeah, I think you can't, if a player has to say yes to it and then they say no to it, and then like, you know what I mean? Like it gets so messy.
Wanted.
Yeah.
Sure.
But if you knew I was playing for Adelaide, Chris rings up and says, we want Jace, there's a trade that's taken place. Jace, you're moving to Sydney. And I knew that all I had to worry about was packing the cars up. My moving was going to be help paid for and all that stuff was going to be looked after. I just had to get to Sydney. They're going to help me find a place.
Smooth.
It's not as bad, but the idea of like everything stopping and halting, like there's a process to that. But if it's going to be helped, it does alleviate.
So in this situation, let's just flesh it out. So let's say you get traded to Sydney last season. They have Sean Bruce, who's on a 2-year deal. Now he wants out because he signed a 2-year, or he signed a multi-year deal. As in, is it a trade or is it a purchase?
I think it's a trade, but it's the same issues that every team has with players that are unhappy or the structure of your team. Things change throughout the season. And then that's a discussion that you have to understand that if you're making that trade, those conversations might come about. I think teams, it gives them, again, flexibility and players flexibility. You don't want players always going to request a trade. But at the same time, we've granted players releases before, right? And out of the goodness of your heart, no. But at the same time, you want them to do what's best for their career. And what do you get out of it? A small bite, no, or nothing. So you want to be able to understand it. And it sounds transactional. Unfortunately, it's the business we're in. But it's like, you care about these players, yes, but sometimes you also want to place them in a really good situation that might work for both player and team. They do well, the team does well, but you also come out of some that might not work. And again, I think it opens up the flexibility of what teams are able to do.
For me, I see a potential issue when a guy signs a 3-year deal somewhere. All of a sudden, they get recruited over because of a trade, and all of a sudden they're here on a 3-year deal that's not making them that much money, and they're stuck on that contract. And maybe this team doesn't want to trade that player away because, hey, we've got this player on a smaller deal. Yeah. So all of a sudden you've screwed this player over here. Let me read a quote from a player that I have.
I'd say one quick thing is, wouldn't that be the same as if they sign someone in free agency and it's just 2 months after the trade happens? They could do that anyway. They've got, it reduces the time gap between when you're able to change your roster. 3-year deal, it just means they'll do it in free agency and it's not in the season, and that team hasn't had the ability to try and change.
Just as transactional with the way it is now.
So 2 quotes I have from 2 separate players. One says, trades should only be made part of the NBL if they require players giving consent and receiving compensation for the move. So you don't agree with that entirely, correct? You're not completely for players having to consent to the move.
I think it's no consent. I understand the need for it, but I think it's no consent because I think it limits the number of trades. You have to have a lot of people sign off on one thing that may delay things. And again, for the financial component, I agree with. I think, again, players should be no worse off, especially the lower paid players. Like, I feel like they need to be careful the most. Guys making $1 million and he gets traded,
I think the club should equally bear the burden of the financial costs of all players involved in the transaction.
Yeah. Even if it was just a setup, like I got moved and I knew that I got traded, cool. Maybe I feel a certain way about it, but my next month is sorted in terms of my rent's paid for.
It's like
I can settle back in and I pick up the rental payment.
It's like when players go on their college visits and all the schools come together and pool and they cover the cost of all the travel. Yeah. And I think that's a very sensible way. I don't think players should have a voice in it. Whether or
not with this way. I'll be honest, I would have come into this the other way, being like players should have to. But if there's a side that says, well, the player actually ends up in not a bad way, maybe even better off because the move's being covered.
Trade kicker.
All those little things.
Like I think playing situation.
In your model, who pays that money?
Again, I think that's part of the negotiation. If it's the inbound or outbound team, depending on what salaries going out versus coming in, I feel like that's part of the trade discussion. It's different to the NBA. We don't have draft picks to trade, right? We don't have future picks that they've got rights to players to trade. So you're not going to be able to do the same salary matching in the NBA. Like, it's almost the only asset teams have are players, right? you can throw in cash. I get it, but I feel like cash is going to carry the other component. So really, it's going to be player for player. It's not going to be these detailed transactions that you see.
I don't think salaries matter because at the end of the day, you either lose some in the salary cap or you gain.
You're either going to pay tax. We don't have aprons here, so it's not like there aren't going to be restrictions there.
Well, Olgun, can I ask a question?
Please.
What would be the deadline?
So this is a good question because let's say you do a 2-for-1 trade potentially, or maybe you trade someone for theoretical cash. Maybe there's the idea of a deadline for having a roster on a certain number. Correct?
I like the idea because that question came up. So in our proposal, we suggested doing almost 2 trade periods. You do one a week before free agency, and then you do another one in the most recent FIBA window.
So it would be closed by now?
It's closed now. You get to the end of that.
See, that might seem a little bit early to me.
It is, but then, because then we're factoring in you're trading players around Christmas, right? Like all of those things.
Brutal.
And when
that's not even the big issue. The big issue is you get to January and the Cairns Taipans are out of playoff contention, and Melbourne United buys Jack McVeigh.
It prevented that.
Yep.
It prevents salary shredding, trying to get under the cap. It prevents, you're right, teams, everyone's still in the hunt for the 6 now, every single team. And so if you were to do it later, you're right, you have a team that's out of contention, they go, great, we got
fire sale.
As a
with the biggest,
Jack McVeigh's got a mutual option next season. He's not going to go back. Hey, I'm Melbourne United. We want another 4-man. Let's just trade for him. Yeah, you take Tom Wilson, take Tom Coppins, and some cash, right? As in, that's the theoretical.
Screw themselves long term, though. Like
that's the theoretical.
It goes back to my initial thing with all of this. How many people are actually equipped teams to be able to make these decisions? They can't even make the roster.
Right now, like 1.5, 2.
Yeah. I mean, who has the philosophical core values from a franchise perspective in place and understand what are we trying to do this season, but it aligns with our 3 to 5 year plan as well. And I don't know how many teams have that in place. I know in my head I think
you're giving a lot of teams a lot of credit for that they probably don't. As in, we're seeing so many teams
I can only view it how I would do it. You know what I mean?
Think of the roster imbalances we're seeing now. The amount of teams that can't recruit, that can't build rosters, let alone make trades.
Chris is done.
This conversation though has opened up my eyes to it more than ever before. I see the positive to it, that the deadline would have to be figured out what suits. In a way, to be honest, if you got traded in December or January and you're a family person, you're like, cool, it's in the school holidays. Yeah. It kind of aligns better than it does getting traded in September.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that need to be worked through because one of the main ones is going to be roster size, right? If you want to, in your hypothetical, Sydney sends out 3 players and only gets 1. How do Brisbane take on? They have to cut 2 players in order for that to work. So they need to increase the roster size to be able to cover an additional play coming in. So if a 2-for-1 trade happens, you can flexibly manage more plays coming in because Brisbane can't have a roster of 14. Yeah. But there's so many different nuances that you need to tweak, but it's not as difficult as you would think based on the difficulties in the NBA and the complexities of that. It's not the same here.
Well, with all due respect, at 5-11 and 9th in the league in defensive rating, I'm sure I could find a way to chop some bodies off of that defensive lineup they got up there in Brisbane.
Let me throw one more quote out there from a player. It's a different player. This player says, "There's certainly a world where both players and teams can benefit, but given the financial situation on players and teams, it seems a giant shift in the landscape for players for minimal gain. Players are encouraged to find alternative employment experience and opportunities for post-basketball, and creating a situation where contract durations are now even more uncertain, there would need to be serious financial benefits across the board to make up for what we now can't do." Yes. And then there's the question of, the idea of pressuring, again, if there's a situation where players have to consent, is that almost redundant because a team can just pressure a player into, hey, we're going to trade you, we're going to give you no minutes, or we're just going to...
That's why I think ultimately the bit around it and players feeling like they actually get a bit of a kicker or they end up maybe better off in terms of like, I didn't lose, I actually got some money from doing this because of what I got, everything moved, everything paid for. I think that's where it can take away a bit of the anger.
It could be phased by years of service to the league, go from consent to maybe you have a no trade clause after 10 years in the competition. Maybe at 5 years, you get that no consent. Maybe at 3 years, there's a 5% kicker. You know what I mean? You start to go through levels like that.
There's ways. And again, I think the only way it gets over the line is if it is favorable, yes, to both, but to the players to make sure they're looked after. And so if there's an option in the last year, does that mean the incoming team has to automatically pick up the option? There's ways that it can also give players more certainty or confidence on what their long-term career prospects may be with that team. Maybe they're wanted there, right? And so I think it only gets across the line if players are better off and they have flexibility. Again, you're not factoring in, we're not discussing as much players that may want, as you said, you wanted a release. Players may love the idea of it because they've got a brand new situation. They don't like their 3-year situation that they signed in the offseason.
There was times that I've had for sure where things are going on and you're like, geez, if there was a way out of this. Now, but
did it during the season or post or after?
During the season.
Yeah.
But there's now listen, it was heavily built in me when I was younger that no matter what the situation, you find a way to improve it. And that's how I'm wired.
Yeah.
But if someone came along and said, we see what's going up there, we think we could use Jace, and they presented something, and you would say, what's the play? I'd be like, yep, I'm in.
Well, the season before last, you got benched.
I had my first ever 2 DMPs in my life.
You got benched, and you were out of the rotation. And then when a change was made, you were brought back into the rotation with seemingly no reason either way.
Because there was no reason. But that's my point. There's things that go on where it's like,
You would
talk about what we want.
moment.
In that moment, if you said, Jace, what do you want? Like, there's way more to this story. But in that moment, if someone came along and said, just for example, Chris is sitting here, Sydney want you, let's do it. How does this work? What do we do? Like, players go through that stuff. So I don't see why there isn't a period. It's just, once again, I think the players have to also benefit, maybe even a little bit more to get this going.
Yeah, because all the players I've spoken to a lot, I haven't heard from many who are for it.
Yeah.
Granted, had they been presented with a model that's feasible, potentially not. But most players as of now are not for it.
Which I was up until about 15 minutes ago. Now I'm probably...
You've got to do it in stages. You can't rush it because, again, if you can't walk it back, it's hard to bring it in and then stop trades. It's like, so you've got to make sure it's right. Everyone's on the same page. All the things are worked through. But, again, I think that there's ways that may benefit players.
And how many would we really see?
Like, I don't think we'd see many. Again, like the pressure of pulling the trigger on a trade is a difficult thing. Like, and again, you speak about the people who are in charge of rosters at the minute. Like, I don't know how many are like fully capable of pulling off sort of meaningful trades.
Yeah,
that are really going to move the needle.
I guess you guys won't be invited to the GM's Christmas party.
We didn't name.
Neither are you.
What if we were talking about him the whole time? We didn't name names. I appreciate the discussion, everybody. I feel like these are discussions, again, that we all have behind the scenes with players, with other people involved in Australian basketball. I think it's important that this is brought to the fore and we can speak about some of the good things the NBL is doing and also some of the challenges that it'll face and some of the progress that may need to be made in order for the NBL to keep up with the global basketball space. So, guys, I appreciate your time. This has been the NBL panel on ESPN. We'll see you guys next time.